Here on Flow FM, great to be chatting with the South Australian opposition leader, David Speirs. How are you, David?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. You've been into regional South Australia pretty regularly since you became leader of the Liberal Party. You were down in the southeast recently. What took you down there?
Yeah, I'm trying to do a regional trip about every fortnight to get into some of the great parts of our state and meet some of the great people. I've been to the southeast 3 times since becoming the leader, actually, and a combination of meeting with local councils. I'm structuring my visits around catching up with mayors and councillors and council CEOs, local tourism authorities, ag bureaus, even Liberal Party branches and members, so that I connect in with our membership, which is an important thing to do when you become leader. So really asking the question, what do regional South Australians want from their alternative government and their alternative premier? So big question, but that's all part of rebuilding in opposition.
Is there a general message or sense you're getting from these regional visits? Is there one sort of theme or issue they're raising with you right now as a big problem?
Well, there's a couple of interrelated ones. So skill shortages and housing shortages. Regional South Australia is booming. I think the vast majority of people would be pretty aware of that in terms of great agricultural production at the moment because of the good weather we've had for the last couple of years in most places, but also big surge in tourism and visitation, and a lot of infrastructure built under our government and still happening. All these things have meant there's a lot more people moving to the regions, visiting the regions, working there, but that leads to skill shortages in areas like tourism and hospitality, trades and labour, and that's quite a stress for regional South Australia. So in some ways a victim of success, but there needs to be a little bit of government intervention to try and ease that.
Yeah, as a country boy myself, it's an exciting time to be broadcasting in regional South Australia for those issues that you mentioned. You've got, I think, 7 country MPs in the Liberal Party, but there's 4 seats you don't hold in regional SA: Giles, Narungga, Mount Gambier and Stewart. Is that part of what you're hoping to achieve longer term, is bringing those seats back into the Liberal fold?
Yeah, look, I would love to win those seats either as a Liberal, with Liberal candidates, but my door is very much open to the Conservative independent MPs. I've got great relationships with all of them. I think that's one of the things that I bring to the leadership of the Liberal Party. I've never been factionally aligned. Of course, I didn't set out to lead the party. This is a bit of shock to the system. In some ways, that gives me a lot more capacity to build relationships and say, well, look, I haven't been a factional warrior. I haven't set out to do this job. So it gives me a bit of a blank canvas to paint a picture of what my leadership will look like. And so getting into those seats that are held by independents and connecting with those communities and the members of Parliament who are independent is an important part of it.
Well, I guess one of those factional identities that moved on was Vicky Chapman. You've had a very close shave by the looks of it in Bragg. Was that the voters' verdict that 4 months after a state election they were taken back to the polls again?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it was anything from a policy point of view. I don't think it was anything really about leadership or the direction we were heading in. The good voters of Bragg were taken to the polls 3 times in 100 days, a state election in March, a federal election in May, and a by-election in July. I say that's a great thing. Democracy in action. Embrace it. Be thankful for it. But, of course, that's just me putting a bit of political spin on it. It was frustrating for people. And I think they gave us what I've described as a bit of a bloody nose. However, we've actually held that seat very comfortably. The headlines and the mainstream media were a bit sensationalist in the immediate aftermath, but since we've started counting pre-polls and postal votes, the margins crept up every hour in that seat.
But it would be
we'll
concerning
hold that by a few percent.
Yeah, wouldn't it be concerning, though, that usually when you have a by-election, the swing is against the government? Is it because it was so close to the recent state election that you have seen a swing against the opposition there, and a big one at that?
I think so. Look, the margin, the swing against will be about 4%, so it's actually quite small compared to what was reported in the press. However, it's still not a great result. But people were annoyed that Vicky Chapman upped and left immediately after an election. I'm not going to reflect personally on Vicky, but it was the inconvenience of it, and of course the cost of it, which is several $100,000, is just annoying. Now, that was outside of my control, but what this gives me is a great opportunity again to reform, reinvigorate the party. Vicky Chapman had been around for a long time. I've now got a young bloke in that place, someone, 31-year-old former diplomat, a lot of energy, a lot of intellect. That's what I need in this party. I need to renew it, reinvigorate it, and take it to the future. And the result in Bragg's really a further goad to action for me. And so I'm very pleased we've held it. A lot of people said we'd lose that seat to possibly a Teal or the Greens. We haven't lost it, so that's a relief, and I'll just keep on building this party.
Now, I want to talk a bit in a minute about your regional trips, where you're heading next, but this renewal you're talking about within the party and the old factions, whatever, you're in dry, wet, or Chapman-Evans, that sort of thing. I think in other public commentary you've indicated you feel like you've creating a clean slate and you're moving past that. I mean, is there still elements of that within the party?
The parliamentary party is hugely unified. There'll always be people with different views in the party, and that's to be celebrated in some ways. But look, we are moving beyond that. As I've said publicly, a lot of these old fights and old disagreements in the party started off before I was even born. They started off in the 70s and the 80s, and I wasn't born till the mid-80s. I put a big line in the sand. I've got no interest in them, and that makes me like all other South Australians, because other South Australians have zero interest in factional infighting and disunity. They want a political party that pitches a new vision for the state. I've been able to get on with that. We won't be painting a big vision straight away, because we'll be getting out and listening and learning and travelling to all parts of the state, speaking to people from all walks of life, so that we understand what they want from us.
Now, the electorate of Flinders covers the Eyre Peninsula and other areas, a bit of a closer shave for Sam Telfer than he might have liked last election as well, but you've had some commentary about the select committee chaired by the former member for Flinders, Peter Treloar, and whether the government's really paying any attention to that important issue for water security.
Yeah, quite disappointed by this. So I've been over to Flinders since becoming the leader. I flew into Ceduna, drove down through Streaky Bay and Elliston, and then landed in Port Lincoln, meeting with people along the way. Water security is really important over there. A lot of opportunity for population and economic growth, but not without water security. So when we were in government and I was the water minister, we announced we'd build a desalination plant somewhere around Port Lincoln. There was a little bit of contention about the site, so we put together a task force I passed the baton to them and said, select the site for me, do the research and come back to me. Now, I'm not the minister anymore, and we've since found out that Labour won't commit to this project. Now, this is the biggest single infrastructure project ever in the history of the Eyre Peninsula. It will secure water resources for the whole peninsula, certainly south of Whyalla and right up the west coast towards Ceduna. And I'm just so disappointed that Labour seem to be walking away from this project. Now, I'm not saying they are, because they haven't confirmed either way, but really we need to give that community certainty and say the money is still there and we're going to get on and build this strategic infrastructure project and give that important part of our state a real heavy lifter in terms of the regions for our economy. We need to give them water security.
Now, still on water security, there's been some commentary from the opposition about this independent commissioner for the River Murray the government wants to create. What are your concerns there?
I've got no time for this whatsoever. Bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, really. The role of the Minister for Water in the River Murray is to advocate publicly and to make sure they are championing the rights of South Australia when it comes to the River Murray. The Minister attends ministerial councils with interstate counterparts. Labour have said they'll create a commissioner for the River Murray. We're saying, well, don't appoint one of your mates to it, and we're not sure we need this at all. The role of the minister is to do that job. During my time as minister, it wasn't always straightforward when it came to the Murray, but we kept all the ministers at the table. We continued the reforms, and the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, while not perfect, was and is delivering. Now, putting in a commissioner, another layer of bureaucracy to second-guess the existing bureaucrats and the minister just seems like a waste of time to me.
And when it comes to the River Murray, I mean, it's a great situation we have at the moment in terms of the water coming through the system, but with the basin plan due to be finalised in 2024, are you on the same page as the Labor government regarding the 450 gigalitres that needs to be delivered to South Australia, and if necessary, buybacks upstream to achieve it?
Yeah, look, Labor and I are probably on quite similar page with that. You mentioned that the river is looking very healthy at the moment. I took the barge between across the river at Wellington on the weekend on my way to Meningie, and it was absolutely chockers with water. It's the best it's looked for years, probably since 2016. So we're very happy with the current health of the river. But there's a 450 gigalitre requirement under the Murray-Darling Basin Plan to be returned to the environment. Progress with that has been slower than any of us would have liked. It is still progressing, but it has been slow. And I always think while buybacks are a last resort, you don't rule them out altogether. You put them in your toolkit, and if you need to pull them out, it's particularly upstream because South Australia doesn't really have any more water to give, and won't be required to provide much towards that 450. But if you need to use buybacks or even threaten to use buybacks, I wouldn't rule those out. So I think Labor and I are pretty close on that.
All right, David Speirs, former Water Minister, now the Liberal leader for South Australia. Thanks for joining us today. The clock's ticking on the Basin Plan and on both of us as well. We've got to wrap it up. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me, Ricky. Take care.